Snow whipped across the endless frozen plains, biting at exposed skin and leaving trails of white across everything it touched. The wind roared like a wild animal, and the cold seemed to reach through layers of clothing, straight to the bone. In the middle of this frozen wasteland, a young Apache woman struggled forward. Her breath came in short gasps, forming clouds in the icy air. Her hands were numb, her legs weak, and her body shivered uncontrollably. Each step through the snow felt like walking through thick ice, but she forced herself onward. She had been traveling for days, alone, following a path marked on an old map that promised answers to questions she had carried her entire life. The expedition she had joined had split days ago, and somehow she had become separated from the others. The wind had torn her sense of direction apart, and now she had only her instincts and her determination to guide her. The snow beneath her knees gave way suddenly, and she stumbled forward, collapsing onto her hands. Her face pressed into the cold, and she tried to push herself up, but her body refused to obey. Fear began to creep in as the cold started to numb more than her fingers and toes. She realized she could not move much longer without risking her life. In the distance, faint smoke curled upward from a thin line against the white horizon. It was small, but it meant life, something human. She pushed herself to stand again, teeth chattering, eyes blurred from snow and fatigue. Every step toward the smoke felt impossible, but she forced herself. Meanwhile, far from the frozen plains, in a small, quiet cabin nestled at the edge of the wilderness, a cowboy lived a life of simplicity. He had spent most of his days tending to his land, caring for his small herd of horses, and keeping his home warm with a steady fire. He was a man used to the silence, to the whispers of wind and snow, to the calm that came with being alone in a vast world. That morning, he noticed something unusual. Tracks in the snow, faint but deliberate, led toward his cabin. He frowned and stepped outside, feeling the chill immediately. The wind tore at his coat, but he didn't mind. He followed the trail carefully, alert to anything that might be wrong. After only a few minutes, he spotted her, a woman collapsed in the snow, her face pale and hands trembling from the cold. Without a second thought, he sprinted toward her. He could see her lips moving, but she was too weak for words. Gently, he lifted her into his arms, careful not to hurt her. The snow-covered ground crunched under his boots as he carried her to the cabin, every second feeling like it would be too long for her to survive outside. Inside, the warmth hit her like a wave. The smell of burning wood and simple food filled her nose, and she blinked at the light. Her eyes, wide with fear and exhaustion, met the calm gaze of the man who had saved her. He laid her on a bed near the fire and quickly wrapped blankets around her. "You're safe now," he said softly, his voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the storm outside. He moved quietly, bringing her a cup of hot tea and gently placing it near her lips. "Drink. It will help warm you." She hesitated at first, unsure if she could trust him. But the warmth of the tea and the cabin began to melt some of her fear. Slowly, she sipped, feeling the heat spread through her frozen body. Her muscles, stiff from the cold, began to relax and the shivers lessened. She still didn't speak, but her eyes followed him as he moved around the room, arranging more blankets and ensuring the fire stayed strong. She was careful to watch his movements, noticing small details. The way he handled tools, how he arranged his few belongings with precision, how he moved with a quiet confidence. Though she didn't understand his words, she understood his intentions. He meant no harm. Hours passed. Outside, the storm continued, relentless and unforgiving. Inside, the cowboy maintained a quiet routine. He brought her more tea, prepared simple food, and occasionally checked her temperature. All without asking anything in return. Slowly, the woman's eyes began to lose the fear that had dominated them since the cold had claimed her. She allowed herself to relax, her mind beginning to process the kindness of this stranger. She spoke finally, her voice weak but clear. "Where am I?" "You're inside, you're safe," he replied simply, pointing around the cabin. He smiled faintly, trying to make her feel more at ease. "Outside? It's not safe right now." She nodded slightly, understanding enough. Her own journey had been dangerous, and this sudden rescue had given her a chance she hadn't expected. She tried to stand, but found her legs too weak. He helped her back onto the bed gently, and she rested again. As the night progressed, she began to speak more, telling him bits and pieces of her journey. She described the strange lights she had seen in the sky, the icy winds that seemed unnatural, and the urgency that had driven her across the frozen land. He listened carefully, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking questions that she could understand through gestures. "You're very brave," he said finally, gesturing to her shivering body. She only gave a faint smile in response, too tired to argue. He respected her silence and didn't push further. By morning, she was stronger. The shivers had lessened, and her breathing was steadier. She sat up slowly, wrapped in the blankets he had arranged, and looked out the window at the snow-covered plains. Though she was safe for now, the thought of the journey ahead made her anxious. She had survived the storm, but the frozen world beyond still held dangers she couldn't predict. The cowboy prepared breakfast quietly, placing food near her. She watched him, realizing that in this simple, quiet life, there was a strength that didn't come from weapons or tools, but from patience, knowledge, and resilience. She felt a strange admiration for this man who had saved her without question or hesitation. After eating, she finally asked him, her voice still weak but more confident, I need to continue my journey. Can I?" He looked at her thoughtfully, then nodded. "Yes, but not today. The storm isn't over. You need strength first." She understood and agreed, though a restlessness lingered in her. They spent the rest of the day in quiet conversation, sharing gestures, drawing maps in the snow outside the window, and occasionally laughing at small misunderstandings. Slowly, a bond formed between them, a bond built not on words alone, but on trust, respect, and the shared understanding of survival in a harsh world. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden light over the snow, the woman felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not just hope for survival, but hope in humanity. She had faced the cold, faced fear, and survived, thanks to a quiet cowboy who lived simply but with strength and kindness. The night fell, quiet except for the occasional howl of a distant animal. She lay in the bed, wrapped in warm blankets, watching the fire flicker. For the first time since her journey began, she felt safe, not just physically, but in a deeper sense. She realized that survival wasn't just about enduring the cold, it was about trust, compassion, and the courage to accept help when it came. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the cabin, the world felt calm. The cowboy moved quietly, checking the fire, preparing for the next day. He didn't speak much, but his presence was steady and reassuring. The Apache woman finally closed her eyes, letting herself rest fully, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities. Somewhere deep in her mind, she understood that this unexpected encounter was the start of something larger. She didn't yet know what it would be, but the trust and respect forming between her and the cowboy were seeds of strength she would need for whatever lay ahead. The fire crackled, the wind moaned, and the night stretched on. Two humans, so different in background but alike in courage and resilience, shared a quiet space in the middle of a frozen world, each learning from the other in ways neither could fully understand. And in that quiet, snowy cabin, hope had taken root. The first light of dawn crept through the frosted windows of the cabin. The Apache woman stirred under the heavy blankets, her body finally warm after the stormy night. The fire still glowed, casting a gentle light across the small, tidy room. She stretched carefully, testing her muscles, still sore but far stronger than the previous day. The cowboy was already awake, moving quietly around the cabin. He prepared a simple breakfast of eggs and bread, placing it carefully on a small wooden table near her bed. The smell made her stomach rumble, and she smiled faintly, the first genuine smile since the journey began. "You should eat," he said softly, gesturing toward the food. "You'll need strength for the day." She nodded and took the food, eating slowly, savoring both the warmth and the flavor. She watched him work, noticing his calm efficiency, the way he moved around the cabin, checking the firewood, adjusting the small stove, tending to the few tools he had neatly organized. There was a quiet dignity in his actions, a sense of mastery over his small, isolated world. Once she had eaten, she sat near the window, peering out at the frozen plains. The storm had eased overnight, leaving the snow sparkling under the pale morning sun. The landscape stretched endlessly, both beautiful and intimidating. She knew she would need to continue her journey soon, but the cowboy's presence made her hesitate. His quiet strength was reassuring, a reminder that not every encounter in this harsh world would end in danger. He approached her gently. "The storm has passed for now," he said. "You can continue if you want, but there is something you should see first." Curiosity flickered in her eyes. "What? Something?" He nodded toward the door. "Outside. Follow me." She wrapped herself in a thick blanket and stepped cautiously outside, feeling the crunch of snow beneath her boots. The world glistened, every snowflake catching the early sunlight. The plains were still and silent, except for the occasional call of a distant bird or the whisper of wind across the snow. The cowboy led her a short distance from the cabin, stopping at a rise overlooking a wide valley. Below, the snow had melted in small patches, revealing strange formations of ice and stone. Glimmers of light reflected from surfaces she could not identify, giving the landscape an otherworldly feel. "They are not natural," she murmured, awe and caution in her voice. She stepped closer to the edge, examining the formations. "I saw lights, like this, before I fell." He nodded. "I have seen them too, for years. I thought I was imagining things. But now—" His voice trailed off, and they both stood in silence, contemplating the frozen wonder before them. For hours they explored the area together. She showed him how to read tracks in the snow, identify hidden dangers, and recognize patterns in the ice formations. He demonstrated ways to move safely, how to judge the thickness of frozen ground, and how to use simple tools to test the ice. Despite the differences in their knowledge, they learned from each other, combining skills to navigate the dangerous terrain. As they worked, the bond between them grew. She realized how patient and resourceful he was, never rushing, always observing. He noticed her courage, the way she faced the cold without complaint, the careful attention she paid to every detail. Words were few, but understanding was deepening. When the sun began to sink low in the sky, casting long shadows over the ice, they returned to the cabin. She was tired, but the experience had given her more than strength. It had given her confidence. She realized that she could face the frozen plains not just alone, but with someone she could trust. That night, they sat near the fire. She held a small journal in her hands, sketching notes and diagrams of the formations she had seen. He watched quietly, fascinated by her observations, impressed by the precision and thought she put into her work. "You are very careful," he said finally, pointing to her sketches. She smiled faintly. Careful, necessary, survival. He nodded. I understand. I am careful too. It keeps me alive. The conversation was simple, yet meaningful. In their shared silence, they understood each other's strengths. Words were not always needed when trust and respect were present. The next morning, she prepared to leave. The storm had passed entirely, and the plains were safer to traverse. Yet, as she packed her small belongings, she hesitated. She realized that leaving the cabin and the cowboy felt wrong in a way she couldn't explain. His quiet presence had become a source of courage, and his companionship had made the frozen world feel less lonely. He noticed her hesitation. You can continue, he said, but if you want, you can stay. A little longer. Her heart lifted at the offer. A little longer, she agreed. They spent the following days together, exploring more of the strange formations in the valley. She taught him how to track hidden creatures beneath the snow, how to recognize the signs of the strange lights that appeared in the night sky, and how to read subtle changes in the wind. He taught her how to make efficient shelters, how to predict weather shifts, and how to use simple tools to travel safely across the ice. During this time, a sense of normalcy grew. The frozen plains, though still harsh, became a place of learning and discovery. The woman marveled at how a quiet cowboy had transformed survival into an art. She realized that humanity was not only about strength and courage, it was about patience, skill, and the ability to adapt to the world, no matter how harsh. One evening, as the sky turned orange and pink with the setting sun, a sudden flash of light appeared on the horizon. It was brief, but unmistakable, sending a shimmer across the valley below. She froze, eyes wide, then looked at the cowboy. I saw it, she said softly. He nodded. Yes, I have seen it before. It always appears near the ice formations. I don't know what it is, but it is not natural. They stood together, watching as the light faded, both feeling a mix of awe and curiosity. It was a reminder that the frozen world still held secrets, and that their journey was far from over. That night, they made plans. Together, they would investigate the strange phenomenon, combining her knowledge of tracking and observation with his experience in surviving the frozen wilderness. The thought of the unknown no longer frightened her. With him by her side, she felt ready to face anything. Days turned into weeks as they explored the valley and its strange formations. They discovered small caves hidden beneath the ice, patterns in the snow that suggested movement of unknown origin, and occasional remnants of technology that puzzled them both. The Apache woman sketched everything, while the cowboy carefully tested the ground and documented safe paths. Together, they pieced together clues that hinted at something beyond natural explanation, something that required both human ingenuity and courage to understand. Through it all, their bond strengthened. She began to rely on him not just for safety, but for guidance and companionship. He, in turn, trusted her instincts and admired her determination. Their partnership became seamless, each complementing the other's skills, creating a unity that allowed them to survive and thrive in the harshest environment imaginable. One night, after returning from a long exploration, they sat by the fire, exhausted but satisfied. The woman looked at him, feeling a sense of gratitude she could not fully express. He smiled faintly, understanding her unspoken words. "You saved me," she said quietly. "No," he replied. "You survived yourself. I only helped." She nodded, realizing the truth in his words. Courage and determination had brought her this far. Yet, without his support, she might not have survived the storm, nor discovered the strange world around them. Together, they had become stronger than either could be alone. As the stars appeared in the night sky, Casting a silver glow across the frozen plains, the Apache woman felt a sense of hope. She knew her journey was far from over, but she no longer feared the unknown. The frozen world, once a place of danger and isolation, had become a place of discovery, partnership, and courage. The cowboy stood quietly by the window, watching the stars. He had lived a solitary life for many years, but the presence of the Apache woman had changed everything. He realized that humanity was not just about surviving alone. It was about connection, trust, and the strength found in unexpected bonds. Morning would come again, bringing new challenges and new discoveries. Together, they would face them, combining courage, knowledge, and human resilience. The frozen plains had tested them, but it had also revealed the extraordinary strength of the human spirit. And in that quiet cabin, amidst the snow and ice, the Apache woman and the quiet cowboy prepared for the future. A future filled with unknowns, yes, but also with trust, partnership, and hope. In a world that was cold, harsh, and unforgiving, they had found warmth, courage, and a shared purpose. The frozen plains no longer seemed endless or intimidating. Instead, they became a canvas for discovery, a place where humanity's ingenuity and bravery could shine even in the most impossible conditions. And as they rested that night, side by side in the cabin, both knew, whatever mysteries awaited them in the frozen north, they would face them together. They had survived the storm, uncovered the first secrets of the strange lights, and forged a bond that no cold, no distance, and no challenge could break. Humanity had endured once again, proving that even in the harshest of worlds, hope, courage, and trust would always prevail.